Welcome to Health Science Study Guide, where today's lesson will focus on synaptic transmission. To understand synaptic transmission, we need to look at the basic components of the neuron and how these neurons are communicating with one another. The neuron consists of a cell body, also known as a soma. Off the cell body are extensions called dendrites. These function to detect changes within our environment, such as hormonal or sensory. It then conducts the signal down the axon, which is a tube, and it's surrounded by a myelin sheath. This myelin sheath acts as an insulation to help the communication go faster. Once the communication reaches the axon terminal, this is where the neurons talk to each other. So what exactly is happening in the axon terminal? The axon terminal is located at the end of the presynaptic neuron. The presynaptic neuron meets the postsynaptic neuron, and there is a gap known as the synaptic cleft. So the presynaptic neuron brings the communication down to the axon terminal, where it will then communicate with the postsynaptic neuron. So what's happening? With the action potentials, it will trigger neurotransmitters to be formed in a vesicle. This vesicle will then fuse with the presynaptic membrane, releasing the neurotransmitters into the synaptic cleft, so the space between the neurons. From there, the neurotransmitters will meet up with its receptor and bind to the receptor. So how does this happen? If we look at dopamine, for instance, the dopamine in the synaptic cleft will find its dopamine receptor. It will then bind to it like a lock and key. Dopamine receptors will only bind to dopamine. So once all the binding is done and the signal is transmitted, there is still dopamine left in the synaptic cleft. So what happens to this excess dopamine? The presynaptic neuron contains uptake pumps. These pumps are involved in taking the excess dopamine and bringing it back into the presynaptic neuron. This ensures that there's not excess dopamine in the synaptic cleft, potentially causing problems. Another way the cell is diffusion. And another mechanism that the cell can use is enzymes. These enzymes break down excessive dopamine in the synaptic cleft, ensuring it's cleared. And that's synaptic transmission. Please follow and subscribe to the channel.